Here it comes. Good evening and welcome to the April 23rd, 2025 Hybrid Planning Commission meeting. I'm Chair Thompson. Tonight's Hybrid Planning Commission meeting is being brought to you by Zoom. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. Commissioners, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. And good evening, Chair Thompson.
Here.
Commissioner Perez.
Here.
Commissioner Neese.
Here.
Vice Chair Gibson.
Here.
And Commissioner Hughes.
Here.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission meets in person and continues to utilize the Zoom platform. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you may then ask your question. The first item of business is public appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the commission about issues of concern, except items requiring a public hearing, any quasi-judicial matters, or campaign-related matters. I will note that there is a public hearing on new dwelling units in existing buildings later this evening and ask you to hold your comments if they pertain to that hearing until the public hearing. Deputy Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for public appearances as of 4 p.m. today who wishes to address the commission?
Thank you, Chair. Actually, as of 6 p.m. this evening, no one has signed up and yes, nobody has signed up. Thank you.
Okay. Since there are no appearances, we will now move to regular business. The first item of regular business is to review and consider approving the February 26th meeting minutes. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion by Commissioner Gibson and a second by Commissioner Neese to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion on this item? Hearing none, Deputy Clerk, please conduct a roll call vote.
Thank you.
Commissioners, please turn on your microphones.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Excuse me, Vice Chair Gibson. My apologies. Commissioner Neese.
Aye.
Commissioner Perez.
Abstain. I was not in attendance.
And Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you.
The motion passes. We will now move to the second item of regular business. Is Planning Commission Agenda Bill 25-07, public hearing on new dwelling units in existing buildings, House Bill 1042. This public hearing is to receive public comments on new dwelling units in existing buildings. Individuals wishing to make a public comment on this agenda item may do so in person or by using Zoom. This public hearing is now open as of 6:05 p.m. Deputy Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for public comment who wishes to address the commission?
Mr. Chair, no one has signed up this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Since there is no testimony, the public portion of this hearing is now closed as of 6:06 p.m. We will now move to the presentation. Welcome Adam Zach, Principal Planner.
Good evening. Let me share my screen here real quick. So I just have a couple of slides to go through with you today on PCB 2507. See, our purpose tonight is twofold. First, I'll give you or provide an overview of House Bill 1042 and the proposed amendments to comply. And all of this is to work towards arriving at a Planning Commission recommendation. So for some background, House Bill 1042 was enacted by the Washington Legislature in 2023. And that bill established RCW 35A 21440, which requires cities to allow in certain zones the addition of new dwelling units in existing buildings, subject to specific criteria. Cities or Mercer Island must amend its development code to comply with this bill by June 30th of this year. And failure to comply would mean that the state law would supersede and preempt the local regulations. So we're working to get ahead of that. The bill is pretty straightforward. As I mentioned, it requires cities to allow the addition of new housing units in existing buildings, specifically in zones where commercial and mixed land uses are allowed. And for Mercer Island, that means the Planned Business Zone, or PBZ, Commercial Office Zone, CO, the Business Zone, B, and the MF2 zone, and the Town Center zones. And within kind of underpinning this is that these existing buildings are those that received a certificate of occupancy in at least 3 years prior to the permit application to add housing units. So it's something that has already been in operation. In effect, the idea is, if there's a commercial structure that the owner would like to convert part of it to like apartments or something, we need to allow that, but with very specific conditions. The proposed amendments were provided in the Planning Commission bill. These would add a new section to Chapter 1906 of the Mercer Island City Code. That the draft was provided both in the Planning Commission bill and then also in Exhibit 1. Exhibit 1 provided the draft code side by side with the RCW, so you could see kind of how those requirements match up to the state requirements, to see really to illustrate that we're hewing to the minimum requirement set in the state law. I do have a work. I'm not going to go through the draft, or I wasn't planning to go through the draft line by line in my presentation, but I do have a draft available if that would be helpful. If the Planning Commission wants to take a look at those, the proposed regulations, I can pull that up after I'm finished with my slide deck here. We received 2 comments from planning commissioners prior to the deadline for providing comments on the proposal. We received a comment from comments and questions from Vice Chair Gibson and Commissioner Neese. The comments and the staff responses were provided to the Planning Commission in advance of this hearing. So hopefully you've all had a chance to see those questions and see the staff responses. We can dig into any of those following the presentation if that would be helpful, but those were provided last week. So the process tonight, I just wanted to, this is your first recommendation as a planning commission. And so I just wanted to give you a refresher on the process for deliberations. So you'll start with a main motion to recommend the new section as amended. I provided that motion language here. This is assuming if you decide to make any changes, you'll keep that and as amended at the end of the motion. And then as subsequent, you can use subsequent motions to make amendments to the draft. And then once you've gone through that process, you can then vote on the main motion, and that would conclude your deliberations and make a recommendation to the city council. So we make the main motion, and then any amendments can be made as additional motions to that before voting on that main motion. Looking ahead at the next steps, once you've made your recommendation tonight, staff will prepare an initial draft of a written recommendation And then that'll go to the chair for review and signature. And then that recommendation will be taken to the city council. We're planning to bring this forward to them for a first reading on June 3rd. Sometimes with these recommendations, the chair or vice chair would come to the council meeting and make comments to, if there's additional commentary that needs to be made to the city council, they can come kind of present the planning commission's recommendation. But that's an optional step. Then following that first reading on June 3rd, we'll move to a second reading and adoption on June 17th. So that's our general timeline. As I mentioned, this was a pretty quick presentation. If you do have additional questions, I'm happy to answer those now. Like I said, I have the draft ready to go if you want to take a look at any specific provisions. Otherwise, I will turn it over to you.
Questions for staff?
The proposed motion to approve as amended, the amendments being, I'm seeing 2 in the comment and response section. There's the one on parking and then another one on envelope and site modifications.
That would be, yeah, if the planning commission wants to make those amendments, again, you'd make the main motion to recommend the draft as amended, and then you'd go through and make additional motions to make those individual amendments. And then you'd vote on the main motion after you've done those amending motions.
Got it.
Any other questions? I have one question. If I read it correctly, the language on parking states that the code official may condition additional parking rather than shall. One of the concerns I have is, if I read it correctly, the city cannot require additional parking for the additional housing dwellings that are added to the building, but can require that whatever parking was previously required continue. And this seems to leave it discretionary within the code official whether to do that or not. And I'm just concerned that if we're going to start adding a lot of additional dwelling units without any type of lease or other deed requirements, that the person does not own a car. I mean, that's, I think that language maybe should be shall. That there shouldn't be discretion. We should not allow any parking to be lost when we're increasing the number of dwelling units, because we're going to increase the parking. Just as quickly, one of the things that I just think is a disconnect is for the state legislature to increase dwelling units and decrease parking, but then disallow a city to require that somebody sign a lease or some covenant that they're not going to own a car if they live in a unit without any on-site parking. It's just like a public subsidy from the city. There's no pet clauses in a lease. So since we're not discussing that, we don't have the option of doing that. I think that it should be mandatory that whatever parking was required for that building prior to conversion to dwelling units remain. What do you think, Adam?
So in the response to that question in the comment matrix, we can make that a shall. The stipulation from the state is that we just can't require additional parking spaces. So changing the language from the code official may to the code official shall, I think would be within the realm of possibility. any amendments that you do make here do need to go through a legal review before they go to the city council. But it's my understanding that that would be close to, or not, if not consistent with the requirement here. So
I think it would also be consistent with the council's direction to staff virtually for all of these state zoning bills, that at this time the city do the minimum necessary to meet the legal requirements. And I think when we're increasing dwelling units, we do not want to decrease parking. And that should almost not be something where the code official or staff are put in an awkward position where they're getting requests or applications to do that, where they can just sit there and say, it's a bright line, it says shall, you will retain, you'll have more additional dwelling units, but you will retain the same amount of parking. So that would be my amendment.
May I question? Yeah, again, this is going to be primarily for you, Adam. Permission
Yeah,
to
sure. Yeah.
to quickly speak. So I think one of the things I like the intent of where the chair is going with this. I think the thing that we need to make sure that we're if we are going to say shall, I would say that within the existing envelope, I think as described in this provision, but if there were increases or decreases to that envelope, that would not mandate the existing parking, if that makes sense. So say a commercial building is being remodeled, the size of that footprint is being diminished for some reason. The required associated commercial parking would remain as a contingent to the square footage of the commercial use, not what it was prior to the changeover to the residential. I know we're getting
Well,
quickly.
I think that's a question for Adam. If the building is 3 years old, but it is modified, but actually reduced in size for some reason, does that take it out of the qualification for this bill or this ordinance?
it wouldn't. There's a little bit of gray area in terms of how much modification to a building eventually crosses that threshold. But in general, this is restricted to, most of these provisions are within the existing envelope of the building. So to stick with parking rather than to kind of go beyond that, if a building had, was required to have 10 parking spaces when it was initially permitted, this is just saying what we have to do is we can only require those 10 spaces to be retained. We can't require them to build 12 spaces because of the changes for the dwelling units. If they went through and they added another 10,000 square feet of commercial space as part of the same renovation, they would have to meet the parking standards for that commercial space. So it's just, we can't require additional parking spaces for the dwelling units themselves. Does that make sense?
Well, it does confuse me. So if I build a new building, I can wait 3 years and then apply to convert it to housing in a commercial zone?
In theory, that would be possible. We wouldn't be able to require you to add additional parking spaces for those new dwelling units added to the building.
Right.
But in all likelihood, if you were to build a commercial building, the commercial space requirements of that initial building would probably require more parking spaces than the residential spaces, because our commercial parking standards tend to require, more parking spaces per square foot. So that might have, that would probably offset some of that. But again, at the end of the day, the real challenge here is that the state has told us that we cannot require additional parking spaces for the addition of the new dwellings in the building. We can only require the retention of existing parking spaces.
Okay, and my point or my motion is simply to change the discretionary may for the code official to shall for the reasons that I stated.
Chair Thompson, just as a point of order, I haven't heard a motion made
Right.
and a second. So if we are at that place where we want to make a motion, a second, and then debate, that would be wonderful. But I want to make sure that other commissioners have an opportunity to weigh in as well. So if you'd like to make a motion, this would be maybe a good time to do that.
Well, I don't think we have the main motion yet, have we?
No, and so if we're just asking questions, wonderful. But if we're debating the issue, I just want to,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Any further questions, comments, before we, go to the
On
main,
parking,
or on any part of this?
I would like to talk about the density. So as I was looking at this, I was really thinking about how these buildings, as an architect, would be altered and the things that we may come across as challenges, and seeing that density bonus might be lost if things like site development work, let's say it needed some utility work, ADA ramp or something of that manner, would then that exterior work would be exterior alterations, and then the project would not qualify for the bonus as I read it. And as I believe some of the comments from the staff clarified. So the question really is that fair for maybe minor things like that to disqualify a project for this bonus? I split my potential amendment into kind of two categories. One is a more aggressive, where additional items on the exterior may be allowed, such as a small increase in the floor area, a height limit increase for exterior decks, things that might be needed for residential. In conversions I've seen, exterior fenestration, adding more ventilation, access, terraces, those sort of things often are necessary things to make these buildings actually more habitable. I've been in buildings that have been converted to from office to residential and that haven't had some of these things, and they're frankly not very nice residences. So I split that into sort of a more aggressive that captured site changes as well as architectural changes, and then sort of a downplayed one that just deals with site, because I felt like at a minimum, something like utility works, ADA ramps, small patios, things like that, doesn't seem like a criteria that should disqualify from getting a density bonus.
Any further comments?
Just a question on that. So if you do add an ADA ramp to a building, does that actually disqualify you from this provision or this allowance?
As it's currently written, subsection C regarding maximum density, it stipulates that there wouldn't be any exterior modification of the building. And so in order to qualify for exceeding the maximum density of the underlying zone, all conversion work has to happen within the existing building envelope. And what that's hewing to the minimum required by the state, which is a floor. So if the commission does want to go and allow some kind of exterior modification as part of that, that would be okay, because as long as we're not going kind of below the floor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess, would you be able to kind of qualify it as two separate projects and say that the conversion and the ADA ramp are not related, and therefore, is there a different path to get an ADA ramp installed or something, a utility work or whatever the case is?
No, you would need to apply for the entire development with the permit at the time.
Got
Could I ask
When
for,
we get to the deliberations on this, it might be helpful, once we have a motion on the floor, I can again pull up the code and you guys can see it if that's that might be helpful when we get to these individual provisions. Just throwing that out there. Yeah.
Commissioner?
I'll wait for your for the details in the individual provisions. Thank you, Adam.
Mhm.
And I just have one more question to clarify. I read, does this not apply to the ground level? This ordinance, I didn't quite understand that.
It does. So one of the things that one of the requirements from the state is that we cannot require ground floor commercial uses except in places where we already have that requirement. So in certain areas of the town center, what's called the pink lines map in chapter 1911, we have some required ground floor frontages. We can still require those certain uses along those frontages because we already require them. We can't create a new ground floor use requirement unless we're designated something as a pedestrian corridor. And that would be something that is kind of outside of the scope of what we're looking at today. But we could look at that in the future if desired. But my point that I made in my response to that question in the table was that probably where we would get with trying to find a pedestrian corridor is we'd end up with the same frontages that are on the pink lines map, because those are the main places where we have, most of the foot traffic in the islands. It's in town center there where the commercial center is.
Any further questions, commissioners? Seeing none, Adam, could you maybe put your motion back up so I can read it exactly as written?
Yeah, let me get that here.
All right, I will ask if anybody would like to move to recommend the proposed new section of Mercer Island City Code as presented in PRC 25-07 and as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we are now open for discussion. Although we've already had some discussion, is there something
Chair,
further? Chair, Commissioner Perez, I thought you had perhaps a question.
could I just ask for clarification? Who made the motion, the second?
Oh, the motion was made by Vice Chair Gibson, and it was seconded by Commissioner Neese, right before Commissioner Aki.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have something?
But I had a question, maybe you could help me with this, Adam, and just trying to understand fully the provisions associated with this code. So there was some question regarding, we've already talked about this idea of density. Is fenestration part of this consideration or not at this point? As long as you're not increasing the floor area, increasing the building density, and coverage on a site, is fenestration in particular part of this?
Some of the provisions require that the changes to the building be entirely within the existing building envelope. So in order to qualify for that density bonus, that has to be entirely within and can't have these extra, as drafted, you wouldn't qualify for the additional density if you're making exterior modifications. You could still add dwelling units to the building if you're making exterior modifications, but you wouldn't necessarily qualify for that additional density.
Okay, thank you, Claire.
Are there any further questions, discussions, or motions to amend?
Okay, so I'll start with a motion to amend the maximum density to include that the building envelope and site may be modified as follows. Exterior features may be added to comply with ADA or required fire and life safety. Two, that was one. This is two, landscape and hardscape alterations to accommodate features for residences such as patios. Three, alterations in exterior fenestration to accommodate access and ventilation. Four, awnings at fenestration to provide weather protection and or solar shading. I'm sorry, that was four. Five is exterior features to accommodate necessary mechanical and utilities may be added to provide the gross floor area of the building would not be increased by more than 5%. And six, unenclosed rooftop features such as decks, stairs, and railings may be added provided they do not increase the existing building height by the lesser of the maximum allowed in the subject zone or 20 feet.
Chair, if I may, I'm going to recommend that two things. One, if Commissioner Neese has that language on your computer, if you would please email it to myself, Allison, and Adam. And secondly, unless there's a strong feeling that all of you agree with those points, it might make it simpler to break it down into individual. Those are a lot of amendments in one motion.
Just for clarity, Adam, I don't know if you can bring this up. This should be on the matrix that you, the Word document. If you're able to share that, that might be helpful too.
Yeah, let me get that here.
Commissioner Neese, just for clarification, this is your more expansive motion.
That's correct.
And then you have
If-
a second lesser one.
Yeah, if the commission feels this is too much, then I would make a lesser motion to just cover site features.
Okay. I guess my comment while we're still there is, I think that there's a lot of good ideas in there. But it's a lot for right tonight or something. So if Adam could bring those up and we could start to look at them. I almost wish I also knew what could put it side by side with your second lesser one.
Both are on that Word document, if Adam's able to bring that up.
Yeah.
Oh, I have it here, okay.
Let me zoom out.
Mr. Chair, I'd also like to point out that Commissioner Accuse has her hand up.
Oh, Commissioner Accuse, please go ahead. I didn't see that.
Thank you. I'm gonna hold my question. Thanks. I want to read this first.
Commissioner Neese, this is the one, right? This is your.
That's correct. That's the latest. So the lower part, where it says an alternative, maybe to allow for just the site work, those are the 3 points that would just cover exterior features. No modification to the exterior envelope.
And as a point of order too, the motion was made, but there wasn't a second. Now that we have the language up, is there, we can have discussion if there's a second to the motion.
I second it.
Okay.
Let the record reflect Chair Thompson seconded
Okay.
his motion.
So a question on this motion, number 5, allowing the gross floor area of the building to increase by no more than 5%, would it already be assumed that they would not be able to exceed the gross floor area of the underlying zoning requirements, just of what the building already is? Or would this allow somehow for somebody to get a greater gross floor area than what the zone currently allows?
Adam may clarify this. My guess would be that as written, it probably allows for extra. I think that could be clarified in that to say not to exceed the underlining zone.
Right, yeah, that would be my
Mhm.
preference. If this allows for it, then to go exceed the zoning gross floor area, then we should clarify that you're still limited by that requirement.
Does anybody else have any comment on what Commissioner Gibson just stated?
No.
This is Chair Thompson. I would agree with Chair Gibson that there be some language that whatever additional gross floor area is allowed for these amenities when it converts to residential from commercial, in any case, the building can't exceed the zone's gross floor area ratio. That I agree, no bonus.
Or I would even expand it to just the underlying zoning regulations, so setbacks, height, gross floor area, et cetera.
Right.
So I'm just going to put this in here because I think this would get it. So this could maybe be added to this final sentence, the highlighted text here that would get at that, so that no one of these 6 things would allow something to exceed the requirements of the underlying zoning.
Yes, that is consistent with, I think, Vice Chair Gibson and my view.
May I ask a question also? And again, Commissioner Nazim, I'm a little hung up on the word, again, item number 5, exterior features to accommodate necessary mechanical and utility may be added. Is this use utility? Or is this like municipal hookup utility?
I think that should maybe say utilities.
Okay, thank you. So municipal or building use utilities.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
And then the only other question would be, in that same criteria, if that's changed to the word utilities, the features that you're talking about above, the fenestration, the solar control, ventilation, those sorts of things, neither of those are mechanical or utility related. So there may need to be some other provision or another word, perhaps in item number 5, to accommodate and include the items above. Does that make sense?
Do those items increase the gross floor area?
That's right. Well, the patios, for example, that you've offered, the site coverage would be increased by the awnings, those sorts of things.
That could be an issue.
Okay.
Would that fall under what Adam added as not to exceed the requirements of the underlying zone if it has like a maximum impervious already listed, that it would be controlled by that?
Yes. And again, yes, that would fall underneath the underlying zoning, correct. But I guess what I'm trying to do is just understand the exterior features in order to qualify for this additional 5% or not increased by more than 5%. maybe I'm reading it a little bit too deeply, but I just want to make sure that the awnings and the alterations and the fenestration changes, if they protrude beyond the existing envelope, would be included in that additional up to 5% above and beyond the the underlying zoning.
I think
They
they,
would,
because they
they
don't include interior or gross floor area.
right. If something were added to the building that added gross floor area, with the addition of the highlighted text there, it would then, the backstop would be the maximum set for that zone.
Okay, all
Um,
right, good, thank you.
No comments.
Thank you.
So this is Chair Thompson, the two limiting factors are the 5% and the maximum allowed for the zone, correct?
Yes, for number 5.
Okay. I have a question.
Chair Thompson, if I may, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hughes has her hand raised again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Hughes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I have two questions. One, has staff reviewed this proposed amendments to see if there are any conflicts with underlying code? And then I guess my second question would be, I really appreciate the detail and thinking about it. And if they're necessary to include, I'm not quite seeing how, I'm not seeing the language about how these types of things wouldn't, okay, the building envelope and site may be modified as follows. Okay, and site. Okay, so it's the and site. I missed that part. But what I'm wondering is there anything in the underlying code that would preclude these additions? And I guess what I'm asking is it necessary? Because sometimes I don't want to add detail if we don't need to add detail, because it's confusing to people. But if it's necessary, and I understand the purpose. So I just want to know, would this be allowed? Would all of these things be allowed within the existing code? This is a question for staff. And has staff checked to make sure there's nothing in conflict with existing code?
So the first part of your question, so if a development were trying to take advantage of this density bonus, if somebody were designing a development to meet these standards, they would also have to meet all of the other standards. So things like setbacks or maximum building height, or we've talked about maximum impervious surface, those all still control, even if you're using this provision. This is really the way this would work is you would have to meet all of the other standards of the zone, and that except we're allowing you to exceed density by a certain amount. And then within that, provided you're not expanding the building envelope, within that confine of complying with the underlying zone and exceeding the density by a bit, and not changing the building envelope, we're going to allow you to do these 6 things in addition to. So there may be other provisions of the code, like I said, like setbacks, maximum building height, max impervious, that something in this list could run up against. But those are the things that or the underlying zoning would be the things that kind of interact with this. The second part of your question, we haven't done a full review of how this might relate, but again, this is kind of, so that would take place before we take it to the city council. So the legal review, the consistency review, and if there were something in here that came up as conflicting with the code, we could bring it up with the city council at that time.
Okay, so safe for us when voting on this, if we think these are all good things that should be allowed within that 5%, then we vote yes. And assume that there's no conflict. And if you find conflict later with legal review, there'll be a revision.
Right. Yeah, we would bring that up with the council.
Okay, great. Thanks.
I have a question or a comment about section 6. The purpose of this is to create more housing And I get the idea that the housing density bonus is smaller housing and more affordable housing. But you as an architect are saying how to make it more pleasant housing, which usually makes it more expensive. I just think that when we get into roof decks and 20-foot increases in the height for roof decks, we're getting away from the goal. On Mercer Island, the rooftop railings count against the height limit, and I think that those are 60 inches, 5 feet for a rooftop deck. And I could see that, and then whatever surface that you need up there or plants. I think the 20 feet gets away. It's too much.
The 20 feet is consistent with other jurisdictions with the idea that you would provide ADA access up to the roof and then elevator overrun and mechanical space for that elevator. So that's a common dimension that's used. Maybe possible without doing that, depending on the type of elevator used, to be lower. But that's hard to say from a zoning perspective, whether that's going to meet all the requirements of a particular building. If you put a roof deck up there, you do need ADA access. You can't do one without the other.
I see.
And the way I understand it is that we'd be adding a roof where a roof is an allowed feature based on the underlying zone. It just may not be a part of the building before the project starts, right? We're not allowing a roof in an area that wouldn't have been previously allowed.
Minimum
Because
rooftop
it's-
deck.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Adam, are rooftop decks allowed in the zones that this ordinance would apply to?
I do not believe that they are prohibited, no.
Not prohibited.
But this, as drafted here, number 6 would not allow a building to exceed the maximum building height. So
Right.
it's still, everything would still be held to the maximum building height standards for the zone.
I just have a problem with the way it's written, where we're talking about 20-foot height increase for a rooftop deck on an ordinance based on a state bill that's really designed to increase maximum density for more moderate or modest affordable housing. And we have a council who has directed us to do the legal minimum, which I'm assuming that's what was drafted. You know, we're going beyond what the council instructed us to do. But I also understand and am sympathetic to your concept of saying we might as well make it pleasant. You know, this isn't, we're not really increasing the envelope, we're adding some appurtenances. But the roof deck and the 20 feet, unless it's explained better that it's for an elevator or. But I mean, what would be the cost of extending the elevator to a rooftop deck? To make this pencil out, that's something different, but when I look at it, I don't know what the 20 feet is gonna be. I just think that. I don't know how many commercial buildings just have an extra 20 feet lying around. But. If we put something in there about the ADA elevator or something, I think then it's makes more sense. When I saw the 20 feet, I thought, well, are you talking about big trellises with plants and rooftop bar, that type of stuff?
I think that could be clarified to state that 20 feet is only permitted for elevator overrun in mechanical space.
Okay.
And that might clarify that. And then everything else has to fit within the underlying zone height limit.
Well, but we're really expanding the envelope. I mean, somebody can do that. I mean, if they wanted to put a roof deck, but they're getting density bonuses here by not expanding the footprint of the building. So I'd be comfortable with a railing for a roof deck in the height and the elevator overrun for the ADA access. But not stating if you have an extra 20 feet lying around, you can use that and it doesn't count as altering the envelope
Mhm.
for the bonus, density bonus. I mean, they can do it if they want. They just don't get the
Right, they lose the
bonus.
density bonus.
Right. So if there's some language that could say that the 20 feet is for the elevator overrun. And then Adam, isn't it 5 feet for height of a railing for a rooftop deck?
42 inches.
Is it 42 inches? Then, I guess we could go to 6 feet in case, they want to be a few inches above for the railing. Then I like your ideas. And it explains it to the council why we went beyond what is, really required, because you've really been following this with the council. I don't get the idea that they're keen on these incentives.
Which is one of the reasons I proposed a lesser of just the site work. So, if we all don't think that if we all think this is a little too much, then, could fall back on that.
No, I like it.
Maybe recognized, Chair.
Oh, yes, Commissioner Hughes.
Sorry, I've been hanging out here for a while. I wanted to propose a motion to add the language to Commissioner Neese's motion. I think that's how we move through this, right? We add a motion to amend, and that motion would. Can you put the language back up on the screen, Adam?
Yeah.
And I say this having lived in the Trace Lofts on Capitol Hill in Seattle. When you get really tiny apartments that are that dense, a rooftop deck becomes extremely important to get out of the house and have a little air. So if anyone does want to include these buildings, I know how important a rooftop deck is to the community. They can have barbecues and things like that. It's pretty nice, but I definitely understand that 20 feet. When I read that, I was pretty shocked too. So it makes a lot of sense. So the idea would be on number 6, the motion would be to add the language after at that area where it says subdeck zone or 20 feet. It would you put like a comma after zone, and then say or up to 20 feet for a elevator. Actually, I should probably ask Commissioner Neese to write this because he'll get the language better than I do. Up to 20 feet for a elevator shaft. And please, Adam or anyone, correct that. Thank you.
No, that doesn't work.
So I'm going to propose this motion, and then if anyone wants to second it, then we can debate this language.
I second.
I can't.
Might be simplest just to say up to 20 feet for elevator access.
Did you?
Yeah, that's what I've got here.
Deck railings?
Oh, sorry, Zach. And then I think that the 6 feet might be a good number because it's often the case that you have to add structure and then the railing if the existing roof is not capable of supporting a roof deck. So having like 1.5 feet for structure would be helpful.
Okay. 72 inches. From the,
Chair, could you please speak into the mic so we can hear you?
oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, but that makes, but, I mean, that's acceptable to me, and the intent, I think. Sure. Sure.
Yeah, so is there another spot in the Mercer Island Code that defines these allowances for elevator overruns, rails, and et cetera?
Not that I'm aware of in terms of building height. No,
Oh,
the,
okay.
the height is the height.
That's kind of what I was asking earlier. I think that would be, if we already have language, it'd be great to just defer to that. But if we don't already have that language in the underlying zone development code, then it makes sense to add it here. Okay, so we're 3 motions in. So if we like this language, if we're happy with this language, then once we're done with the debate, I think the chair can call for a vote on the 3rd motion, and then we have to work our way back.
Right. I think on this point, for me, I would, instead of trying to define heights for these different elements, I would defer to what the existing code already allows for those types of features. And so I think the point here is that we're just allowing the bonus to be preserved if they're providing unenclosed rooftop features such as deck, stairs, and railings per code requirements, existing code requirements. And I would just stop it there and let the code requirements define it instead of this, our bonus trying to define it.
Chair, point of order. I hate to interrupt the role that everyone's on, and I appreciate what we're trying to accomplish here. But as the person that's responsible for taking the minutes of the meeting, I don't have captured the first motion, the second motion, or the third motion. I wasn't aware we had a total of 3 motions on the floor at this point. I was aware of the first motion, which captures the language that's up on the screen, but that language has also been somewhat modified. And I don't have the language of the second motion. Apparently I missed that, nor do I have the language for the third motion. So
Deb, if I may, I think the first motion was to pass the whole thing. And then
And
the second motion was Commissioner Neese's amendments, which are in green. And then the third motion was my modification to the language there.
And I
So number
appreciate that, Commissioner, but I don't have any of this language on my
Okay.
cut and paste from. And to make,
Okay.
we've made adjustments to this as we've been going along. So as the person who ultimately has to apply their name to the minutes, I need us to slow down this process and make sure that I have everything correct for the record.
Do you want us to go back and do the Adams original motion
I would like,
and then have,
I have Adam's original motion.
okay.
I have, it's my understanding that Commissioner Neese would like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, not as it's stated here on the screen, but how it was originally stated.
Correct.
Okay. And then and now, thank you, your original, I'm now catching the 3 motions and then the third one. So, but I don't have the original language. It's been modified. And I don't have the language captured for the third one either. So I need to slow down the process in order to do this right.
Right, okay, so, do you want us to go back to the second motion and actually have, Commissioner Neese read his motion with his language?
No, that was a very lengthy motion. I need that original language so I can capture it because that's the second
Yes.
motion. And then I also need the language for the third motion because we have to go through these one at a time before we go back to the main motion. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to be a stickler for detail, but I have to be in this case.
Can Commissioner Neese email you?
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
In the process.
And then we'll go back and have Commissioner Acuse formally state her motion.
Thank you.
And then I'll repeat it. And then I believe it will be Commissioner Perez who will second it.
So the only thing, Adam, and maybe you're getting to this point. So if Adam has all of this straight on his end and would like to take over as the clerk to the commission and repeat what the emotions are, I'm happy with that because I know he's tracking things on his end.
Yeah, Deb, I sent you this document here. So I sent it to you via Teams. But yeah, I think that I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties on my side here. And so
I see it now, Adam. Thank you. And I appreciate that. Things have been slow all day as far as the server goes. So
in fact, I think I'm going to lose my connection real quick. I'm going to need to rejoin here. So I'm going to pop off for a second because
this might be a good time for us to take a brief recess.
Adam,
then.
can you hold on so I can get a screenshot before you pop off?
Sure.
Because my third motion was very small, and that might help us get out of the mess a little bit. Because the third motion was only on item 6, up to
Yes.
20 feet, up to, the words up to and the words for elevator access.
Yes.
Those two phrases on the end of 6, that was the third motion.
Correct.
And then everything else in green was the second one.
Yes. And the things highlighted in yellow have not been actually formally moved.
This is Chair Thompson. I agree with you. We did modify the parts in yellow without any type of formal motion.
Yeah.
So can Commissioner Neese modify his original motion?
The original motion maker and the second can agree to a friendly amendment to make those highlighted changes, and then we can come back to the change to 6.
All right. Do you remember who seconded it? I can keep track of it.
I believe it was it Vice Chair Gibson?
I think that's right.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
Yep.
All right. Commissioner Neese, would you like to make a friendly amendment to amend your original motion to add the highlighted language? And I would ask that you read it. And then Chair Gibson can agree to that and second it. And so this will become actually your amended language.
Okay, so I motion to amend my original language to include not to exceed the requirements of the underlining zone, as well as correcting the word utilities, utility to utilities.
Chair Gibson, do you agree to that friendly amendment?
Yes, I second that.
All right. Motion passes.
What do we
No.
have to vote?
No, it only passes.
The friendly motion. Oh, I see. The
Now we're in
amendment
discussion.
is just amended. It hasn't passed.
Correct.
All right.
So now we would move to Commissioner Accuse's proposed change to number 6.
All right. Commissioner Accuse, would you please state specifically your motion?
Yes, I'd like to move to modify item 6 to read after the word subject zone or up to 20 feet for elevator access.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right. So we now have Commissioner Accuse's motion, the third motion, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Perez. Is there any discussion on Commissioner Accuse's proposed motion? Commissioner Neese.
I wonder if elevator access should also say elevator or stair access. We'll probably have the same issue of stairs going up to provide egress as elevator would have. And you probably need at least 12 feet for a stair.
Again, we're getting a little.
Commissioner Perez.
Yes,
yeah.
sorry. Perhaps there's, again, we can maybe go to a bit more general language here where instead of even elevator access, 20 feet for required code access or required ADA access, we could just simply leave it at that, I think. And be
Well,
more code compliant.
Right now, we have Commissioner Accuse's motion
I'm,
before.
I'm fine with that change.
So we're gonna do another friendly.
I think at the discussion, we can change it, can't we, as written?
I'm sorry,
you can-
commissioners. You had a motion on the floor.
Yep.
You had two amendments on the floor,
Yes,
and then you wanted to make a friendly amendment to the original motion.
correct.
At Mercer Island, we don't do friendly emotions. We either agree to pull back the original motion and the second, or we don't. You have, at this point, it's a little bumbled. I don't know how else to put it. I'm trying to put it nicely. We have, I think the intent is honorable, and we're trying to get through this and make the best of it. And so what I want to try and do is get us back on track. There's Robert's Rules of Order, but how I will counsel you is that, I don't want Robert's Rules of Order to hold the meeting hostage and moving you forward. So your original motion was what Adam suggested in the agenda, on the agenda bill. Please keep in mind, we may lose Adam at any point here, so I'm trying to be conscientious of that as well.
Right.
You have Commissioner Nice's amendments, which are on here. Okay, and then you have what Commissioner Accused wanted to accomplish. In light of the fact, so that takes us back to where I originally interrupted you all. My apologies. Because Adam may lose his connection anytime, I would like to go back to where I'm recommending that we take a 10-minute recess. Let's reassess, give Adam an opportunity to do what he needs to do on his end so we don't lose his valuable input here. And then we can come back to this with a plan of action to clean this up and do it the right way.
All
Does
right.
that work?
Yes, it does. It's just a very complex.
It is very complex, and I understand that, and
Amendment.
that's why it's so important to me that we do it right. And I apologize for interrupting, but I do want to make sure that we are capturing this correctly for the record. So, and give Adam an opportunity to check out and check back in and make his equipment work on his end.
Okay,
Okay?
yeah.
Thank you so much. And so the time now is 7:10. With your permission, Chair, we'll take about a 10-minute recess.
Yes, let's
And
take a
reconvene.
10-minute recess at 20 after 7.
Fabulous. Thank you.
20. It's 7:22 and this meeting is back in session. We have pending the original motion that is proposed by staff. We have pending Nazim Neese, Commissioner Neese's motion to add 1 through 6 parts. And then we have pending Commissioner Acuse's motion to Commissioner Neese's motion to add language to section 6. I think that there was some discussion because there've been so many changes that if Nazim Neese, Commissioner Neese, were to withdraw his motion, he could resubmit it with some of the changes that we made, or we can go through them one at a time, 1 through 6.
So Commissioner Neese made the motion, you seconded it, Chair. So if the two of you agree to withdraw that motion, we can clean this up and move forward with a clean slate and one that maybe is easier for all involved.
Yeah, do you agree?
I agree.
I agree as chair. All right, the motion is withdrawn and that withdraws Commissioner Acuse's motion to that motion. So we're back to the very original motion to adopt the ordinance as drafted by staff. And that's still pending. Are there any amendments to the original motion?
Yes, I motion to amend maximum density with the alterations 1 through 5 that Deb has via email.
Thank you, Commissioner. I do have that for the record. If it would make things simple, I'll go ahead and read it. Okay. 1, exterior features may be added to comply with ADA or required fire and life safety. 2, landscape and hardscape alterations to accommodate features for residences such as patios. 3, alterations in exterior fenestration to accommodate access and ventilation. 4, awnings of fenestration to provide weather protection and or solar shading. 5, exterior features to accommodate necessary mechanical and utilities may be added provided the gross floor area of the building would not be increased by more than 5%. That's 1 through 5.
Yes, and it also includes Adams Act's alteration on the sentence above 1 through 5, not to exceed the requirements of the underlying zone.
And can you tell me exactly in number 5 where you would, is that to go at the very end of that sentence?
Correct.
Not to exceed, excuse me. Not to exceed, excuse me. Could you repeat that?
Not to exceed the requirements of the underlying zone.
Allison, does that match with what you have from Adam?
I was just making an edit to that. I was going off the version that was on the screen previously.
Would it help, Commission, if I shared my screen and then we could make sure that we're all on the same page? Okay.
Please.
If you'll give me just one moment. Okay. So what I added is this portion that you see here. I'm going to take Chair Thompson off here because I do not have a second at this point. I want to make sure we have the motion correct and then we'll get a second on it.
Deb, the sentence not to exceed the requirements of the underlying zone is actually added in the sentence before the 1 through 5 start.
Oh, up here?
There's a sentence that did read the building envelope and site may be modified as follows. And then Zach added not to exceed the requirements of the underlying zone.
We're gonna make sure we get this right, so
Yep.
bear with me.
Deb, in the email that I sent, it
Yep.
was the first line.
Yes, I have it
Great.
right. Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is what I have in your email.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is the portion I want to get rid of down here. Thank you. So motion to. What do you want that to say up there? It's a little bit wonky. Motion to amend.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
motion to amend the maximum density.
Okay. Of the building envelope.
Maximum density, I don't know, the maximum density section. I think you're just missing the word the. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Does that look accurate?
Section.
Adam had zoning as opposed to zone. I don't know if that matters.
I think zone is actually correct.
Yep.
Grammatically correct.
Welcome back, Adam. Much appreciated.
Thanks.
We're glad to see you.
So Deb, I would probably say the maximum, motion to amend the maximum density section to state that the building envelope may, and then
Adam, does that look good to you as well? It looks like you're working off of your phone, so,
Yeah.
okay. So if Commissioner Neese, if that looks good to you, we need a second to the motion.
I second it, Chair Thompson.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion?
I guess I would ask if I may be recognized, Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Accused.
I'm curious. I was assuming Commissioner Neese was going to add item 6, the elevator access one, to that. If folks want that, I can make a motion to this motion, because if we vote on this and don't add that now, we can't come back and redo it.
I think that we decided that 6 is the problem or the issue, 1 through 5 or not. And so why don't we just stick with 1 through 5? And
Okay.
if those are acceptable, we can hold a vote and then move to 6.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Anything further, or are we ready for a vote on Commissioner Neese's motion to add, to amend, to add sections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the ordinance? Nothing? All right. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Okay, Commissioner Accused,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
All right.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes on the amendment.
Do we have any other amendments to the main motion that is pending?
I was
Is-
hoping someone with better architectural language than myself would add it, but I would like to make a motion to amend item 6.
Well, there is no item 6 yet.
Oh,
We're gonna have to wait until somebody, are you going to make a motion, Commissioner Neese, now to add section 6 as an amendment?
Yes, I can.
Go ahead.
Okay, I didn't quite have enough time to draft the wording, so let me just start with this and we can fine tune it. I motion to include amendment 6 to add unenclosed rooftop features such as decks and railings may be added provided they do not increase the existing height by the lesser of the maximum allowed in the subject zone. Too fast? Okay, no problem. Start over.
I have motion to include Amendment 6 to add unenclosed rooftop features such as decks and,
Railings
thank you,
may be added
mhm,
provided that they do not increase the existing height by the lesser of the maximum allowed in the subject zone by 6 feet and elevator or stair access may be added provided they do not increase the existing building height by the maximum, sorry, by the less. Sorry, just a second.
would it help if I put it back on the screen so you could look at the language?
By the lesser of the maximum allowed in the subject zone or by 20 feet.
second.
I'm going to share this and
Yeah.
confirm. I'm not, I'm pretty darn certain that I got the last few words a little bit bumbled, so let's just take a peek. Unless Adam has it perfectly typed up. On your mini screen there, Adam?
This will be the one time I don't have it perfectly timed up. Yeah, that's my promise to you. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna let you look at that language and tell me where I should fix things, Commissioner.
Deb, I think you have an extra the before 20 feet.
That looks good.
Okay, so I have a motion by Nice and a second, if, correct me, I think, Kate, you agreed to second that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, does anybody have any comments or discussions about paragraph 6? Commissioner Perez.
Thank you. Thank you very much for recognizing. I just think we need to go through and clarify a little bit. I'm having a very hard time following, even though I think I believe I understand the intent. The language is a little convoluted for me. That so yeah. Maybe I just need to let it sit here for a minute. I'll ask the other commissioners if is this a clear indication of the intent based on what's been discussed at this particular point?
I will say that I am having problems with a density bonus state bill and ordinance that now starts giving envelope bonuses for rooftop decks. I don't think that was an intent of the state bill. And the council did make it very clear that we were to do the minimum legally necessary. I felt sections 1 through 5 are pretty minimal and make sense. But now that we're getting into rooftop decks with 20-foot increases in the height limit, I don't think that's consistent with the directions from the council or the bonus density. I mean, a building owner could always do that. There's nothing that prevents them from doing it, but not with the bonus density. So I'm leaning against number 6.
As I read it, if I'm not, we're still limited by the maximum height of the zone. It just would be that they would get a density bonus if they had to add that to get rooftop deck access. So yeah, I guess if you're against it, then they just won't get the bonus if they want to do those features.
That's correct. I mean, they are getting a density bonus. Your 1 through 5 seem to be reasonable and necessary amenities. We get into rooftop decks and up to 20-foot height increase. That seems to me to be outside the direction of the council. And the bonus density. I mean, they're getting already that bonus. So giving them this outside, it's supposed to be within the building envelope. The other amenities and features are on the site. They're minor. I don't think that this is minor. So I'm leaning against the rooftop deck.
I do think Kate made a good comment though earlier about livability and rooftop decks being a big part of that.
Commissioner Gibson, Commissioner Accuse, you have something to say?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add that 30% of Mercer Island residents are renters, not owners. That's a third of our community. And if I guess if you take a whole building and add 50% as a bonus of living quarters, that's going to shrink all the apartments on average by 25%. I'm not sure if I'm doing the math right there. They're definitely going to need some outdoor amenities. Just a reminder that people who live in apartments often don't have outdoor lawns or gardens that homeowners do. They do contribute to our property tax base. They're important to our economy. And I think it's important to make sure that whatever we do with this, if we're squeezing people into smaller places, we make sure we can maximize their outdoor living space, as it's not modifying the footprint and it's not creating a massing problem if the tall places are limited to just a little elevator shaft. Railings don't add a lot of massing. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Any Commissioner Perez?
Thank you very much. If I can just add the comment, that I'm in agreement with the intent and the direction of this particular piece also. I just having some difficulty associated with the language. So if there's some way to clarify on the language, I would be in, I would also believe that this would be a reasonable incentive and an in-scope encouragement to developers to move in this particular direction.
Would you like me to bring the language up again? Is that,
Yes, please.
If I may, I think the part where it gets a little bit confusing is it says decks and railings may be added provided they do not increase the existing height with the lesser of the maximum allowed. It's right there. It starts to get a little fuzzy. I think there's a transition there that's problematic. And I would encourage Commissioner Neese to or we can work together on modifying that. That transition is tough. It's where
Well,
I had
let's remember what our clerk has explained to us. You can make a motion to change the language. And if somebody seconds it, that will do it. But if we're talking about redrafting this paragraph, it's almost going to be better for Commissioner Neese to withdraw his motion and come back with a new motion with the language that Commissioner Perez and ACUS are looking for. Although I'm not quite sure what that is. So this is the motion. This is the language in the motion. If you want to change it, make a motion. If you want to basically kind of make quite a few changes or redraft it, it's probably going to be better to have Commissioner Neese withdraw his motion and resubmit it with whatever language Commissioner ACUS and Commissioner Perez are looking for.
I'm wondering if just simply changing and if since this is the discussion portion, we're allowed to discuss as opposed to immediately propose a change. It says that they do not increase the existing height with the lesser of the maximum. I wonder if it's something like do not increase the existing height greater than the lesser of. I know that sounds awkward as well, but there's just something wrong from height with the lesser of. I think a very simple change of language could be a good motion, but I will leave it to Commissioner Neese to propose that. I was just going to suggest that was a good place to add some clarity.
My comment is, I think that the language is clear enough. I understand what he's getting at, and I think that the staff would be able to apply that. We don't need to all agree on the exact language. I read that, I understand it. If these are the things that you want, I think the language is good enough. We could have a vote on it, unless Commissioner Neese wants to withdraw the motion and submit something with different language.
No, I'd say we just vote on it.
All right, so the motion is pending. There's a second on the motion. Are there any more comments on paragraph 6? Hearing none, clerk, call the roll, please, or the vote.
thank you, Chair. Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Nay.
Commissioner Hughes
Aye.
and Vice Chair Gibson.
Nay.
Motion passes 3-2.
Okay, now we're back to the underlying motion. Are there any other motions commissioners want to make to the language in the proposed ordinance? Commissioner Gibson.
I move to amend the parking section as recommended by the staff in item 1 of the comment and response matrix. I can read that, or we can pull that up.
What's the amendment?
Allison, do you have that readily available that you can share?
I also have it in front of me if you want me to read it out loud.
This is the version I had been working on.
Yeah, so this is, I'm referencing log number 1, the very first
Oh,
in the table, yeah. Yes,
There's that it?
yep, regarding parking.
Allison, is that the working copy or is that the PC comments?
This is the comments matrix, but it's the SharePoint version. It's what Adam was editing previously when he was sharing his screen.
Deb, I sent that to you as well.
That's-
Via Teams, yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm looking for, is to make sure we're all on the same document.
Mhm.
Okay, can you clarify your motion for everyone, for the record?
Yes, so I move to amend the parking section as recommended by staff in item or log number 1 of the comment and response matrix.
Can you clarify what language you are asking to be struck and to be added?
Yes. Deb, are you ready for that?
Is it exactly as it's,
Yeah, exactly as
okay.
recommended there.
Unfortunately, when I cut and paste, it does not give me the strike and underline. However, if this is how you want it and that's exactly as it's written, then I'll go with that and I can put that in the minutes.
Yes, that's great.
Okay.
I can read it if that's helpful.
All right, so are you comfortable, Deputy City Clerk, with that language?
I am, sir.
All right, is there a second for the motion?
I second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Neese. Yep. Was that Adam? Oh, Echo, okay. Since it's your motion, would you like to speak to it, please, Deputy Chair?
Yeah, so this addresses a handful of comments that some of us have brought up, but I don't believe that the code official should have the ability to determine whether existing parking spaces should be or should not be retained. Instead, this amends it to say that the existing parking spaces must be retained, and it's more clear.
Any other comments?
The only other question I might ask is, if I may, you're saying existing parking spaces, which seems to imply it's not the number of parking spaces, but it's the actual parking spaces. If some of those if the code requirements have changed in terms of ADA requirements or secondary requirements other than just simply that may have changed over time through the codes. I think it would be clearer if we were to say existing parking space quantity or existing number of parking spaces as opposed to existing spaces.
Are you making a motion?
I am making a motion, yes.
All right,
Can you restate the motion, please?
yes.
Yes, I would state that instead of existing parking spaces, it would be existing quantity of parking spaces must be maintained.
Is there a second for the motion?
I second that.
Any discussion on that change? Do you have any objection, Vice Chair, to that?
I tend to think that the original language is clear, so I don't necessarily think it's necessary.
Yes, Commissioner Neese.
I would say, I think it's a good idea that it would allow for moving around some parking spaces to accommodate some site features without, I mean, nobody's going to repave an entire parking lot unless they have to. So I think there would be minor changes, most likely.
I tend to agree. The intent, I believe, is there, should not be discretion by the code official to reduce the number of parking spaces. But also agree on the clarification that we are talking about the number of parking spaces, not the actual space itself.
So Chair, if I may, point of order, we need a second on the motion before you can debate it.
Oh, I thought it had been.
I heard
Chair,
Commissioner Perez make a motion. Did you second? Okay, thank you. My apologies.
any other discussions? I can't see Commissioner accused. Do you have any comments?
No, thank you. I like the revision.
All right, can you call the vote?
So Chair, first we need to vote on the amendment to the original motion. And the amendment was made by Commissioner Perez, seconded by Commissioner Neese to amend the statement to add the words quantity of after existing.
Yes.
Commissioner Accuse,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Amendment passes 5-0. That brings us to the original motion, if you'd like me to state it.
Yes, please.
And I only have recorded who made the motion. That was Commissioner Gibson. Can you repeat who made the second of the original motion?
I believe.
It was Neese.
it
Thank
was
you.
Commissioner Neese.
Move to amend the parking section as recommended by staff in comment 1 of the response matrix to read as was shared on the screen. I can read it out loud or we're all in agreement. Great. Okay. Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Accuse.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, we're back to the original motion to adopt the ordinance as amended. Is there any further amendments or discussion? Seeing none, Deputy Clerk, would you call the vote?
Yes. Trying to keep all this straight. Okay. Original motion. Vice Chair Gibson,
Yes, I move to accept.
No, just, do you?
the
oh,
original
you're
motion
voting.
was to amend.
Aye, sorry. Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson, thank you. Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Accuse,
Aye.
and Commissioner Perez.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, votes taken. The last item of regular business is Planning Commission Agenda Bill 25-08, Parks and Recreation Commission Park Zone Recommendation. Welcome Deputy Director Allison Van Gorp and Management Analyst Carson Hornsby.
Thank you, Chair. Allison Van Gorp, Deputy Director of Community Planning and Development. Carson's going to do the presentation tonight. I just wanted to kick it off. This is going to be our first work session on this item. In addition to Carson and I think our Chair and Vice Chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission might be joining us remotely now. They had to leave a little while ago. All right, looks like we've got them. They'll be available to take questions and speak to kind of the process that their commission undertook to prepare this recommendation. In terms of our process going forward, we'll be doing the more formal legislative review of this proposed amendment. Tonight will be the chance to get the recommendation from the Parks and Rec Commission, ask questions, et cetera. Our next meeting in May will be the public hearing. At that point, you will have a chance to deliberate and you could make a final recommendation on that night. If additional time is needed, we will schedule a special meeting in early June because we would like to get to this to the city council in July so that it could be completed before the summer recess. I'll go over the details of kind of the schedule and how we're going to go about things at the end. But we'll give you a chance to make written amendments or questions in the same way that we've done with past amendments. All right, Carson, why don't you give us the overview?
All right, thanks, Allison. Good evening, Planning Commission. Carson Hornsby, Management Analyst. As Allison mentioned, I'll be covering an overview of the Park Zone materials tonight. Moving into the agenda, we'll start off with some background information on the project and then move into the main components of the PRC's recommendation, which include drafts of the Park Zone development regulations, zoning map, and land use map. And then we will end the presentation by talking about next steps in the process for the Park Zone. And then after that, we will invite the Chair and Vice Chair of the PRC on to share some additional context on the PRC's recommendations. So starting off with some background information on this project, the Park Zone is a proposed new zone that will establish development regulations for the city's parks. This is the second phase of the project after the adoption of the open space zone last year. The original plan as part of the comp plan periodic update last year was for one zone to cover both parks and open spaces. However, the city received quite a bit of feedback from the Planning Commission, the PRC, as well as the community. And the decision was ultimately made to split this project into two separate zones so that we could have more specific development regulations for each property type. And so after the adoption of the open space zone last year, the PRC began their work on the Park Zone in October 2024, and they finalized their recommendation earlier this month on April 9th. And if you tuned into the city council meeting last week, the chair and vice chair also provided a briefing to the city council on the PRC's recommendation. And that brings us to tonight, where we're here to hand this recommendation off to the Planning Commission. So the first main component of the PRC's recommendations include a draft of the Park Zone development regulations. So the next several slides will cover all the different sections of the development regulations, starting off with the purpose statement. The purpose statement of the zone summarizes the goals and objectives, and the recommendation from the PRC is that the purpose of the Park Zone is to preserve and maintain parks which provide green space and recreational, social, and conservation opportunities. Designation requirements are the next section. These are the criteria that land needs to meet in order to be included in the Park Zone. And the recommendation is that parks must be owned, leased, or managed by the city of Mercer Island and fulfill the purpose statement of the Park Zone in order for that land to be included in the new zone. Uses permitted is the next section. These are the allowed land uses and activities in the zone. I'll just run through this list really quickly, but before I do that, I wanted to mention that there are a number of new definitions that are proposed to be added to the development code if there are not already definitions in the development code that define many of these items. And the PRC also covered the uses permitted in their memo to the Planning Commission and the City Council to provide some more context and relate these uses permitted back to goals and objectives from the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. So starting off with recreational uses, these are uses that provide opportunities for entertainment or exercise or athletics and other leisure activities. So this can include things like sports or picnicking or walking or jogging. Really quite a few normal uses that our parks are used for. Recreational facilities and amenities are next. The facilities you can think of as more significant developments that are provided specifically for recreation. These can include athletic fields or sport courts. Amenities, on the other hand, are more they're like supplementary type structures and as well as furnishings. And so examples of these can include picnic tables and barbecues. Park maintenance facilities are structures like sheds and storage facilities that provide opportunities for the Parks Department to store their tools and help with operation of the park. City government services are listed as a use permitted specific to the Luther Burbank Administrative Building, Boiler Building, and Caretaker's House. And the reasoning here is that these buildings currently serve and have historically served many non-parks and recreation uses. And so the intent here is to allow those uses to continue post-adoption of the park zone because these buildings are pretty vital facilities in the city's long-term facilities plans, and there are not alternative buildings to move these services to at this moment in time. Next up are public art and trails. I think these are both pretty self-explanatory. Public art covers art installations in parks like murals or sculptures, and trails are off-street pedestrian pathways. Moving on to the second half of the list of uses permitted, we have habitat restoration and enhancement. These are activities that improve the health of the landscape or habitat and can include things like planting of native plant species or removal of toxins or pollution from water or soil. Parking is also included as a permitted use. And then temporary uses and structures are also on the list. These are most often related to volunteer and stewardship events. So examples can include temporary equipment staging or storage areas or other things like tents or gazebos or tables to set up for volunteers. Wireless communications facilities are also on the list. The city regulates wireless communications facilities citywide and an alternative or a different section of the city code. And so it's not proposed to be regulated specifically by the park zone. And then last on this list is utilities. Parks are not often ideal locations for utilities. However, it's often a necessity that utility facilities that are a part of the city or a part of the utilities that serve Mercer Island. So such as water, wastewater, or stormwater systems, it may be a necessity to include those in parks. Moving into the development standards, we have a number of sections that are proposed to regulate specific types of development. So the next several slides will cover these, starting off with setbacks. The proposed setbacks are 0 feet for public institution, open space, town center, planned business zone, commercial offices, or business. So it's 0 feet if the adjacent property is zoned any of these zones. And then 20 feet is the recommendation for residential, adjacent residential and multifamily zones. Both of these are consistent with language that was adopted for the open space zone last year. However, there are a number of new exemptions that are proposed. Many of these items you'll commonly see on the outskirts of a park or along the perimeter. So for example, signs like the entrance signs or parking areas, you would typically see those on the perimeter of the park as opposed to the interior. Next up, we have a section that regulates signs and kiosks. The regulations for signs are largely proposed to refer to existing regulations in the city code, except for a few unique requirements. The first of which is a limit of 16 square feet of surface area for signs in the park zone. And externally lit signs are prohibited except for park entry signs and signs required for public health, safety, or maintenance purposes. Scoreboards are also regulated in this section as they likely fall under the definition of a sign based on our city code. And they're proposed to be limited to 250 square feet of surface area, and electronic and externally lit scoreboards are permitted in the park zone. These regulations are based on the examples of scoreboards that we have at Island Crest Park. And then lastly, we have a standard for kiosks. The proposal is that kiosks will be limited to 22 square feet of surface area and 10 feet in height based on the examples of kiosks that we have at Luther Burbank Park, as well as Pioneer Park, which is an open space property. The next section includes standards for trails, and this section is pretty brief. It's only provides a proposed trail width limit of 12 feet. The reasoning for that is in the photos listed up on screen, you can see that each of these trails has a different material and construction method to it. There's pavement, gravel, concrete, and a raised boardwalk. This is important because trails are often built based on the landscape that they're located on. And so it's important to take into consideration the habitat and the specific types of land that you're building the trail on. And staff needs, the city needs some flexibility here in order to build trails based on these different circumstances. And so that's why it's only a trail width that's proposed. The next section is are the building size standards. We have a table here that categorizes buildings into a number of different types with their gross floor area limit and height limit listed as well. And so I'll run through each of these building types and then talk a little bit about the proposed size limits. Restrooms are basically they're intended to be sort of bare bones facilities that have really basic amenities. So like toilets and sinks. Park maintenance facilities, examples of these include sheds and storage areas, like we talked about earlier. Recreational facilities are in this section. I want to specify here that this is only for recreational facilities that are considered buildings. So this section would not apply to, say, an athletic field or a sport court. These are buildings that are provided for recreational purposes. So you can think of these three types of buildings as sort of your standard building types. These all have proposed gross floor area limits of 500 square feet and 20 feet in height based on several different examples that we have in the park system. And then moving on to multi-purpose facilities, the intention of this type of building is that it involves any two or more of the other building types. So for example, if you have a restroom that also has a park maintenance component or a storage area for equipment, then that would be considered a multi-purpose facility. The proposed gross floor area limit for multi-purpose facilities is proposed at 3,500 square feet in gross floor area, and then a 20-foot height limit again as well. And this regulation or this standard is proposed based on the multi-purpose building at Island Crest Park. Picnic shelters are up next. We have a relatively new picnic shelter at Aubrey Davis Park, and that is the model that's proposed to be used as sort of the standard picnic shelter. that we have in the park system. So the proposed gross floor area limit and height limit are based on that model at Aubrey Davis Park. The last structure on this list is the Luther Burbank pergola. This is the walkway covering that's right outside the administrative building at Luther Burbank Park. This regulation is specific to that structure because it's unique in the park system. There are no other walkway coverings, and there are no plans to add any new walkway coverings to the park system. And so this structure is large enough that it should probably be called out somewhere in this code. And so we've added it to the table with a list with a limit of 2,000 square feet gross floor area and 16 feet in height, which are based on the dimensions of that structure at Luther Burbank. And then lastly, we have a section that proposes that flagpoles, antennas, and other rooftop appurtenances are not proposed to be to count towards building height in the park zone. There are a number of exemptions or proposed exemptions from the building size standards, and these include 4 examples: the Luther Burbank Administrative Building, Boiler Building, and Caretaker's House are proposed to be exempt, as well as emergency well buildings. The 3 buildings at Luther Burbank Park are unique examples of buildings in our park system. They're much larger than other common types of park facilities that you would see in our park system. And they serve uses that are unrelated to parks and recreation. And so if it's not ideal to have these buildings subject to the proposed building size standards in the park zone, because that would render these buildings legal non-conforming. And that's not necessarily an ideal situation for assets of this type of size and value. And so they're proposed to not be subject to the building size standards. Emergency well buildings are also proposed as exempt because these are considered a utility. The next section provides some standards for parking, which largely refer to existing regulations in the city code. The design of parking lots is proposed to be subject to Appendix A of the Development Code, which is a diagram that covers various angles, sizing of stalls, everything about parking. And then the next section also specifies that development permit proposals may also be conditioned to fix parking lot entrances and exits in order to control street traffic. And parking proposals are required to demonstrate that the proposed parking capacity will accommodate demand created by the proposed new use specified in the development permit. The next section of development standards is one for impervious surface. This is a standard that proposes no net new impervious surface in the park system unless the use has been included in an adopted park master plan, the city's ADA plan, or otherwise exempted. We have the list of exemptions below here up on screen, and I'll just quickly run through these items. Emergency vehicle lanes are exempt because we need to make sure that we have emergency access to parks to respond to emergencies. ADA parking and accessibility is exempt because these are required by federal law. Public trails are exempt because any surface other than natural soil is considered impervious. Required surfaces for playground equipment are also included on this list. The PRC had a discussion about the importance of playgrounds in our park system, and I think they did not want to see any new permits for playgrounds being denied because of an impervious surface standard. So that's included here as well. Synthetic turf athletic fields are also proposed as exempt. These are also considered impervious because it's not natural soil. And I think these really need to be exempt if we plan to add any more new fields, because they take up quite a bit of room, and that would be very difficult if they were not exempt to the standard to add new synthetic turf fields. Small park amenities under 100 square feet are also included on this list. The idea here is that there are a lot of different small structures throughout parks, like posts for a fence, or a surface beneath a garbage can. And so these are structures that are commonly and frequently added to the park system. And so we want to be able to have some flexibility to add small amenities like these to parks without having to go through a separate process to remove existing impervious surface from the park system. Ending off the list here, we have emergency maintenance and repairs, as well as utilities. The last couple sections of the development standards regulate lighting. So we have the first section is a section for more general lighting, and then the next lighting section is for outdoor performance and recreation facilities. The general lighting standards include language that requires lighting to be designed to minimize glare, sky glow, and light trespass onto neighboring properties. I think you can think of glare as sort of the light being too intense for when you look straight at it. Sky glow is when the night sky is lit up by lights below from the park. And then light trespass is when light falls beyond the property line in which the fixture is located on. Fixtures also need to be fully shielded and installed in a way that prevents light trespass beyond the property line. And then there are also a number of exemptions proposed. One of the exemptions I just wanted to talk a little bit about, as there may be some questions that come up, is the exemption for existing lighting. Typically, lighting is not frequently changed out in parks. It's a very expensive endeavor to change out lights and update them with new standards. And so the idea here is that when a light fixture is replaced, then that new light fixture will conform to the new standards. And then we have the section for lighting for outdoor performance, sport and recreational facilities and play fields. We have this lighting for these facilities are proposed to follow along with proposed standards from the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, and not to exceed them by more than 5% for the specific activity. So this is an organization that publishes standards and best practices. And so we're proposing to follow these for various activities that take place in these types of recreational facilities. The fixtures for sport fields also need to be mounted, aimed, and shielded so that beams fall within the primary playing area. And then there are also a couple of additional requirements requiring that lights be shut off no more than 30 minutes from the conclusion of an event. And then that lighting is also equipped with timers to automatically extinguish lights after or when the facilities are not in use. These are the new definitions that are proposed to be added to the definition section of the development code for key terms that are used in the park zone development regulations. I won't run through each of these individually. However, would encourage you to look in the development regulations exhibit to see the exact wording for the definitions for these terms. The next piece of the PRC recommendation includes a draft of the zoning map. This is the draft zoning map is proposed to replace the map in Appendix D of the development code, and the parks that are listed on screen are proposed to be included in the park zone. There was a lot of discussion at the PRC level about different properties that should or should not be included in the park zone. And so they have included a section in their memo to addressing some of these properties and the reasoning for why they were not included in the park zone. This includes, I'll just cover these really quickly. This includes Aubrey Davis Park. The reasoning here is that Aubrey Davis Park falls within WashDOT right-of-way, and the city does not have the authority to adopt conflicting development regulations for WashDOT right-of-way. The landing and street end properties are also addressed in the pros plan, but these are right-of-way areas, and they have a primary purpose of utilities. And so even though they have a secondary purpose of passive recreation, the primary purpose is utilities, and so these are not proposed to be included in the park zone. South Mercer Playfields is a school district property. It's located, or it's also listed in the inventory section of the pros plan, but it's not proposed to be included in the park zone because it doesn't follow the designation requirements. And then the last property that was discussed but is not recommended for inclusion is the Mercer Island Community and Events Center. This facility serves parks and recreation purposes in some cases, but it also serves a number of very important city administrative functions. And it's a large multi-purpose facility, so it's not proposed to be included in the park zone. Moving on to the land use map. The land use map is part of the comprehensive plan, and it provides a visual representation of land uses throughout the city. The update to the comp plan last year was intended to include all the updates necessary to adopt the park zone. However, we reviewed this again this year and determined that a couple extra updates are necessary in order to ensure consistency between the land use map and the zoning map. And so the first change proposed is to Southeast 28th Street Mini Park. This is a really tiny park right along the I-90 interstate. It's currently has a designated land use of single-family residential, and it needs to be changed to park. And then the only other change specific to the park zone is a change for Rotary Park, which is just a bit south. This is currently listed as open space, and it needs to be changed to park. The other updates that are on this list, I won't run through individually, but these are just a number of smaller formatting and style type changes that we're proposing to roll into this update as well. And so with that covers the main components of the PRC's recommendation. I didn't include a slide on the PRC's handoff memo, but did want to call attention to that. They provided quite a bit of context on their recommendations. So if you're looking for additional information or detail on why a certain recommendation was made, that's probably a good place to start. So with that, I'll hand it off to Allison to cover next steps.
Thanks, Carson. Just real briefly, I started talking about this at the beginning, but we'll be back next month, May 28th, for the public hearing, and we'll ask you to submit any questions, comments, or proposed amendments through a shared document in the same way we've been doing. I can send out a link for that tomorrow. And I'd like to give you the deadline of noon on May 12th for those comments. It'll give you about 2.5 weeks to get them in and give us another week and a half or so to get them turned around to you before that next meeting. Like I was saying, you can potentially make your recommendation on May 28th after the public hearing. If more time is needed, we'll look to schedule a third meeting in early June, a special meeting. In terms of dates, if we need to do that, I was just looking at my calendar, and June 10th is a date that would work on our end. I'll just put that out there in case you want to note it down. We can decide next month whether or not that's necessary, depending on how discussion and any potential deliberations go in that meeting. Okay, any questions about that plan of attack? No, okay. I think the PRC chair and vice chair are standing by if you have any questions for them or want to hear a little bit more of their perspective.
So I think they had the PRC chair and vice chair had a few comments to share before we get into discussion. So if it's all right, Chair, we'll invite the PRC chair and vice chair to share some additional insight on their recommendations.
Thank you, Carson. And for the record, my name is Peter Struck, and I'm the current chair of the city's Park and Recreation Commission. And it's just a little history lesson. It was a little over 5 years ago when our city council voted to include as a work item a proposal to provide permanent protection for our parks. And what you have before you tonight is a proposed new zoning code for parks. So this has been a long time in coming. This evening, we do have a recommendation that you have before us, and Vice Chair Paul Bernstein and myself will be happy to answer any questions. As we've shown our transmittal, we've documented how our recommendations are aligned with the city's current parks, recreation, and open space plan, or kind of what I consider the strategic plan for parks. And so with that introduction, we have a few more specific observations on some of our actions, and I'd like Paul to start.
Thanks, Peter. So Carson covered a lot about this in his comments, but focusing first on Aubrey Davis, since its primary purpose is transportation and it's owned by WashDOT, we set that aside as a public institution zone. We did call out that the lease agreements and the agreements we have in place expire in 2034. So we want to continue working with WashDOT on the master plan and renegotiate in good faith to make sure that Aubrey Davis still functions as a park, looks like a park, and it's called a park, even though it's a public institution zone. Similar process applied to the street ends, as Carson mentioned. Their primary purpose is utilities. So we left that outside the park zone. And lastly, Carson mentioned the Mercer Island Community and Event Center. That has more than just recreation facilities in it. There are administrative offices, there's a preschool, and there is the use of the facility as an emergency center. So we kept that as a public institution zone as well. So Peter?
Thank you. One topic that's received a lot of attention in the community is the use of impervious surface, and I know Chair Thompson is well aware of this issue over the years. The commission really worked hard on this one, and our overarching theme is not to add any new net impervious surface to the park system, with certain exemptions, as Carson pointed, such as ADA compliance and, our athletic fields, for example. We're also well aware that many of our parks are governed by master plans and other documents that provide further transparency regarding the uses of impervious surfaces. So we're quite confident that we've come to a practical balance of what I would call between providing flexibility for the park system as well as protections regarding this topic. Paul?
So the next thing we wanted to touch upon that's in our transmittal memo is about the building and amenity standards. And you may wonder how that was arrived upon. We had a lot of debate about the different buildings and structures. City staff actually went out and meticulously measured everything that's out in the park system. And the overarching goal for us was to not have non-conforming buildings and amenities. So the table that Carson presented represents what exists today in the parks, and we think that's a good guideline for whatever the future may bring. So that's how that table was built, and our recommendation is keep that intact. There's one thing, however, that we called out in the memo, and Carson talked about the fact that administrative offices are now being housed in Luther Burbank. When city has new facilities, we definitely want to have the Park and Recs building exclusively for Parks and Recreation. So when the city has other facilities that they can be moved out, they should be moved out. But the key word there is feasible. Peter?
Thanks, Paul. One of our recommendations to council, and we would hope that the planning commission would support this as well, is looking at Island Crest Park. Currently, we are recommending that Island Crest Park, just off of Island Crest Way there in Mid-Island, be exclusively in the park zone. However, if you have ever walked that park, you know that it's really two different parcels. On the western half is really what we would view more as open space, and the eastern half, where the ball fields are and so forth, would be more considered parks or recreation. And so what we're recommending to the council is that at some time in the future, when it's feasible, that park be subdivided into two parcels, and that the western half would be put into the open space zone, which we believe is what its primary land use is. And we would align that and then keep the eastern half as park zone. So with that, Paul, I think you want to close.
Yep, the last thing was wireless communications and infrastructure. We had quite an active discussion about this in the open space zone, and that continued on again when we discussed the park zone. However, we recognize that the federal regulations and agencies really manage what we can do. So our recommendation in the handoff memo is just that the city work with the right agencies to make sure that they preserve the overall environment of the parks and not make those facilities too intrusive. So thank you again for letting us speak to you tonight, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you very much. Why don't we turn this over to discussion? Anybody have any comments that they would like to start with, or perhaps direction to staff for the next meeting? Kate, yes? Commissioner Acuse?
Thank you. Yeah, I really want to commend the PRC. I think I'm the last standing member of the prior planning commission here, and it's really clear that you all really listened to the public and worked with all the many comments the planning commission provided. I know it was a really arduous process. I think you did a fantastic job making the high level protections that were needed without being overly prescriptive. Each of our parks are really special. And I was particularly pleased to see that the trail width restriction was a reasonable size and left to the master plan so that bicycle use can be accommodated appropriately based on the type of park. So I couldn't be more happy with what you've done here. I will probably have some comments on the turf exemption, especially with the PPDQ9 salmon issue and some of the materials involved in AstroTurf. But other than that, it's just, I'm sure I'll have very few comments. I just really wanted to applaud your work here and thank you for all that effort. I know it wasn't a small effort. And staff as well, because I'm sure staff had a big hand in writing this.
Thank you very much.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Gibson?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about the landings and street end parks, understanding that there's probably some more history to this, but it says here that the primary use is utility and the secondary use is kind of a recreational park, and that's why it's not included in the park zone. Looking at the maps, it looks like most, or if not all, of these street end parks are in a residential zone. What additional kind of flexibility or protections does the residential zone provide that the park zone doesn't?
So this is a good question because the city does not currently have a right-of-way zone. And so most of these properties are actually, like, it's literally the end of the street. It's not like a residential parcel, for example. And so I think there's some plans in the future to perhaps put a right-of-way zone in place. We're just not quite there yet. Allison may have some comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thought was that these properties are primarily a utility use. And so there was a concern that putting them in the park zone could perhaps limit some of the ability to do utility related things in the future that might need to be done if like a pump station needs to get rebuilt or something along those lines. And so leaving them in the existing zoning with the plan of perhaps updating that going forward would leave a bit more flexibility and allow those utility uses to remain the primary objective for those properties.
Got it. But the residential zone in particular doesn't have anything specific that enables that, because it's not necessarily a utility zone either. And utilities are allowed in the park zone. So
Yeah.
just.
Yeah, it was just if some kind of bigger project related to maintaining the utilities or expanding the utilities was needed. You know, there's like the impervious surfaces limit. There's some other things in the park zone that could potentially make that a little more difficult.
Got it.
Commissioner Perez.
Well, I also wanted to thank the PRC, the chair and vice chair for their input. I'm doing a little bit of catch up here in terms of understanding all the efforts that have gone into place at this particular point. So thank you. The question that I have just in general has to do with points of view at this particular point, ideally from the chair and the vice chair, having to do with the comprehensive plan, specifically goal 12 of the comprehensive plan. Just, you know, the idea of public gathering, performing, you know, those sorts of ideas in the park area. I was looking for it in Carson's presentation, if there was any provisions or any sort of accommodations associated with that. So if you could just
This is Chair Peter Struck. Great question. I guess my initial reaction would be is that performances, et cetera, would probably be handled kind of under temporary structures or temporary events, that there is more flexibility there. No, and I think they use it as a 6-month time frame where you can get a permit for various things. And I think that's kind of my initial reaction. I don't know, Paul or Carson, if you have further thoughts.
Yeah, the public performances are permitted. They're primarily in Luther Burbank, and Mercer Dale, and it's not at all within the park zone to have a permanent entertainment facility housed within a park. Other than the existing one, I guess you can call the amphitheater in Luther Burbank permanent, but use of it is permitted.
Great, thank you. And just as a clarifying question, the idea of somewhat related, but maybe independent with this thinking around the idea, again, same section of the comprehensive plan around gathering and knowing that that gathering on this in our environment in this weather 9 months out of the year requires some sort of cover in an exterior park. Could you just talk about that? See if there's any sort of provisions. Again, we're up against this idea of the impervious cover, and it sounds like my microphone's cutting in and out. Is that right? No.
No.
Okay, thank you. If there's any consideration associated with that cover for outside gathering 9 months out of the year in inclement weather.
So this is Peter again. So when you say cover, are you thinking of ground covers where people can sit on type of thing, or are you thinking more like a something over your head so keep the rain off?
Something that is overhead, under cover is the way that.
I think it would be a temporary structure type of approach.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other comments, Commissioner Neese?
Just a question. First, thank you for all your work on this. I'm sure it's no small feat to get to the point where you're at, and appreciate all the detail. My question sort of echoing what we've talked about today on existing buildings. For the 4 exempt buildings, are we locking ourselves in, and maybe you've discussed this, to exempting their size? What if there needs to be some alteration to those buildings to accommodate future changes that we may not know of at this date? I'm somewhat familiar with some of the buildings, but not all of them. Was there any discussion about this and whether some more built-in flexibility might be necessary?
This is Peter again, and Carson helped me out, but we had a discussion about that. And my understanding is the kind of the current footprint is as you said, kind of indicate is grandfathered. But if there was to be any major renovation slash try to expansion, that you know, then the new regulation or the proposed regulations would come into effect. So they're kind of just grandfathered as they are with and if they're going to get renovated, the idea would be, again, I think that there would have to be some help me out here, Carson. I'm trying to think. The way I took, I guess maybe the way I'm struggling here a little bit. The way I would say is that they're kind of, they can sit there, they can, you know, do maintenance to keep it up, but they really can't change a whole lot. If that helps, or.
So, I certainly will look at this and whether or not we could improve the language. Thinking long-term, every building has a useful life, and so maintaining an existing building forever may not be something that is long-term viable. But I understand what you stated.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that if the thought was, well, let's tear down one of those existing buildings because their useful life has expired, you know, then the regulations 3,500 square feet would come into being. So it's kind of like you got what you got now, but that's it.
Are there any other comments before I make some comments? All right, I'm going to make some comments. Peter and I have been pursuing this park zone for 12 or 13 years now. And I do really appreciate all the work you have done. It was actually our opposition to the Aubrey Davis master plan when it was first proposed that led to the formation of the Parks Commission. And I think that has been one of the best things that has happened to Mercer Island, and the city manager did. However, I was also one of the biggest critics of the park zone when it was first introduced in January 2024 by the city manager before it had gone through the Parks Commission. And here are just some of the issues that we had back then. One, you don't need a park zone if you have a really good council and city staff, which we have right now. This park zone comes from a time when we didn't have that, and there was tremendous pressure to sell or pave or develop our parks. So one of the things we talked about is should there be some heightened ability of the council to rezone a park, which they've done. They did it at HAPS in the Sculpture Garden, either a vote of the citizens or a supermajority. The buildings in Luther Burbank have been a very contentious issue. Normally, you would adopt a park zone and then you would give conditional use permits for buildings that don't conform. But we can't do that under our conditional use ordinance. They can't exceed the regulatory limit. So I agree and understand what we did at Luther Burbank with the buildings. It was necessary. However, I'm concerned if those buildings, a lot of people wanted to tear them down, but if the buildings can need to be replaced, you know, Peter seems to indicate they can't be, but I wouldn't want to see a steel and glass building. Some of the other issues, you know, should the Parks Commission have oversight of what the Arts Commission Council wants to put in a park? I think they should. We're working on the temporary use ordinance right now and some of the issues with that. But I think without a doubt, the biggest issue is not including Aubrey Davis Park. It is called a park. We see it as a park, and that was seen as a real omission by the citizens. It was a very serious one. Public institution is a zone that allows 36-foot height limit plus an additional 12 feet for each 2.5 acres. It's an industrial zone, and the design requirements are controlled by the town center and the uses. So we call it a park, but we're not putting it in the park zone. And we're doing it because we're saying that we think that WashDOT would object. But WashDOT's air lease gives them jurisdiction over the park, but their main restrictions aren't any type of development in the park. I don't understand why we can't write to WashDOT and ask them, hey, this is what the public institution allows us to do. If we wanted to, we could put a 50-story building right over your tunnel, which they're going to come in and say, that's never happening. They don't want development. I think from a political standpoint, if we're going to sign off on this and tell the citizens, let's write to WashDOT and say, here's the public institution zone. Here's the park zone, which is how we treat it, and we want to put it in the park zone. Do you have any objection? We did that when we were doing the Aubrey Davis Trail Safety Project, and we were looking at what is the required minimum or maximum height, width of the trail. We wrote to WashDOT, and they wrote back. I really think that we should give direction to staff tonight to write to them, because I just worry that this is the citizens, just like they did in January 2024, are going to look at our largest park and sit there, and they're immediately going to go to conspiracy theories. You left it public institution because you're going to put supportive housing, affordable housing that prior councils have suggested, marinas that you can do, buildings. You're going to develop the park, and that's why you're doing it. I think all this great work has been done. It's going to be overshadowed because people are going to sit there and say, what are you talking about? Our largest park is not in our park zone. And it only regulates our oversight or use or development of the park. It doesn't have any effect on WashDOT. I think WashDOT would write back and say, we always thought it was in a park zone. I mean, we wouldn't agree to any of the development allowed in the public institution zone if you wanted to do it. So sure, go ahead and do it. It would be the same thing. It's just, I think, politically with the citizens, from what we saw in the January 2024 release of the parks zone, I'd like to know. I mean, look, if WashDOT writes back and says, no, I want us, you keep it the public institution, fine. You know, we don't want to go against WashDOT with the turnback agreements coming up and the air lease. But if they write back and say, you know, we don't have any objection to it, I think it looks a lot better for everyone that we put that in the park zone. And I think that's the number one issue. There's some others I'll write. You know, I know that this was a huge contentious issue at the Parks Commission about whether to put Aubrey Davis Park in it. If the objection is that WashDOT wouldn't allow us to put it in a park zone when we treat it as a park, why not ask them? I mean, if they say, no, we like public institution zone, there you have it. You know, we're covered. If they come back and say, that's fine with us. I mean, they were pretty laissez-faire on trail width. Then we can put it in the park zone and not have that possibly become the biggest political issue when the park zone goes to the council. That's my thoughts. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Yes, Commissioner. Oh, Commissioner.
Chair, if I could, I had
Oh.
a few words there. definitely would like to hear from the other commissioners as well, but I did hear you say that you were interested in directing the staff to write a letter to WashDOT. And the process for that would be that you could include a recommendation to the city council to write that letter, but the planning commission does not have the authority to direct staff in that way.
Does staff have any interest in writing to WashDOT to find out if they have any objection? I mean, the
I
Parks
think that would be
Department,
up to the city council to determine.
well, the Parks Commission wrote directly to WashDOT when they were trying to determine trail width through the park.
Okay, I was not involved in that process, so I don't really know, what the context of that was, but we have discussed this internally with our staff team, and the direction I've been given is that, if the planning commission would like to put forward this recommendation to the city council, that would be the process for making this happen.
Okay. Any other comments? Commissioner Acuse.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a can of worms with Aubrey Davis, in large part because we don't own the land. And I think there was a lot of discussion about that, and there were a lot of different opinions about that during the original park zoning piece. So I'll be curious what kind of amendments and things roll out from that, because my understanding as written, you basically have to remove one of the primary premises of this zone, which is that it's owned by the city. And if we don't have the ownership, that's tough. Also, anything we do, if folks are going to propose an amendment, I would just want to suggest, please read, WashDOT has really, really extreme, like detailed specifications. And so if we were going to do anything as a commissioner, recommend anything as a commission to amend having to do with Aubrey Davis, we'd have to have a very, very deep understanding of the history of WashDOT, and maybe that's something that we could get tutored on by the PRC. There's a deep history there. We don't own the land, and it would have to be consistent. Anything we did would have to be consistent with, I'm guessing, books, yay high of WashDOT regulations about that site. So I can understand why it was left out. It doesn't mean that something shouldn't be there. And I was noticing that on the, I have two questions actually. One is on the zoning map, it's listed as linear park, not public institution. And I'm wondering if that's a errata, and maybe staff can address that. And then my second question is, I noticed that there's another sizable building in Mercerdale, the recycling center. And I noticed that's not listed as an exemption. Is that under 500 square feet or what? I'm just curious as how that was considered and treated. So my two questions are linear park in the zoning map, and then what about the recycling center at Mercerdale? How is that treated in this zoning if it's not an exception?
So for the linear park, I believe that Aubrey Davis is zoned public institution, and the land use designation in the land use map is linear park. So we have those two maps that have a little bit different categorizations.
Thank you.
I can also comment on the recycling center building. That building is about 19 and a half feet tall. I don't know what the gross floor area is off the top of my head, but I'm fairly certain that it conforms with the building size standards. So that's why it's not proposed as exempt.
Okay, so the only buildings that were listed as exempt are ones that were large. There are no other buildings that are existing buildings that are larger than would be currently allowed. Because I think that's mostly a maintenance shed now. I'm just curious. It seems like there might be a little conflict there. So I'll follow up later. It's getting late.
As currently written, the only buildings that are exempt are the buildings that would not conform otherwise to the building size standards. So to my knowledge, I don't know of any other buildings that would be left non-conforming.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gibson.
On the building size section, Luther Burbank pergola was listed as a building type. I was just curious why that was in that section instead of as an exemption. And then kind of a follow-up to that, does this mean that other pergolas in other parks are not allowed, or just kind of clarify that?
We had some similar discussions about this structure. It's considered a building essentially because it has a roof. And so you're right that it is the only example of a walkway covering or a pergola of that type in the park system. And so we made it specific, that regulation specific to that structure at Luther Burbank, because there's really not any need to add additional pergolas or walkway coverings to the park system. I think that structure is unique because it just provides a covering to walk from the parking lot over to the administrative building, and that's just not something that's necessary elsewhere in the park system. So I don't know that the code would, as written, prevent other pergolas from being put into the parks. It just regulates that only existing structure.
Got it. Okay.
Are there Commissioner Perez?
Yeah, sorry, if I could just get a clarifying question or clarifying answer on that. The pergola with the impervious cover, would that not be excluded? Any additional pergolas in other portions of the park under the additional ground cover or additional non-pervious? As a roof that would divert drainage.
Well, they could be included if other impervious surface were removed, for example. And there's also an exemption for master plans that are approved by the city council. So if there were a master planning process for a park that included a pergola, that would be okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other further comments, questions? None? Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. That is the end of that. This is just a recommendation that we are receiving. And the recommendation is to receive the report and no action is necessary. So we'll move to other business. Is there a staff report this evening?
Just something really brief. Just wanted to give an overview of the schedule for the upcoming meetings, just so you're aware of what's coming forward. We've had a couple questions since we had to cancel a meeting and reschedule a number of items. First, as a reminder, if you do have comments, questions, or proposed amendments in the park zone, the deadline for that is going to be May 12th at noon. We'll send out a link for that tomorrow. And then that will be the only topic for the May 28th meeting, will be the park zone public hearing and deliberations. As I said previously, if we need to, we'll schedule a special meeting in early June to finalize the recommendation on that. And then coming up at the regular meeting for June 25th, we'll be bringing back the temporary uses and structures item for its public hearing. The recommendation for that is scheduled for the July meeting on July 23rd. And we'll also be starting a new item at the July 23rd meeting. It's another item related to state legislative requirements for co-living housing. So that will get started in July and then come back for public hearing in September. And I'll leave it at that. I think the fall is still fairly in flux based on a whole number of things. So we will give you a further update on that when we get a little closer.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Well, the next regular meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 28th, 6 p.m. There is being no other business to come before the Planning Commission. The time is now 9 o'clock and the meeting is concluded. As a reminder to the commissioners, please stay seated until city staff have terminated the broadcast. Thank you.